When Donald Trump launched strikes on Iran, the goal was simple: shock the regime, force it to back down, restore American leverage in the Middle East. Instead, something strange happened. Iran didn't shut down the Strait of Hormuz. It turned it into a toll road. Oil tankers can still pass, but many of them now have to pay in Chinese yuan, which raises the question: did a war meant to defend the dollar just help create the first real alternative to it? Now, before you think this is just another Middle East war story, stay with me. What just happened in the Strait of Hormuz is not just about Iran and America. It's about the financial system that has kept the US dollar at the center of global trade for 50 years. And the man who just cracked this open, the same person who said he was going to end the wars.
They said, he will start a war. I'm not going to start a war. I'm going to stop wars.
Yeah, we are going there. By the end of this, you would understand why a war in the Middle East could reshape how energy is priced globally, and what that means specifically for African countries still paying their import bills in a currency they had zero say in creating. Now, YouTube just introduced something new, the quiz, and it helps to increase engagement between you and I while the video is going on. Let's go there quickly. The first question is, what do you think the petrodollar actually is? Now, there are four options. A, oil priced in dollars by OPEC agreement. B, a special US government currency for oil. C, a nickname for Saudi Arabia's oil revenue. D, an IMF program for developing nations. Now, let's go back to 1973. The US had just abandoned the gold standard.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold.
Meaning the dollar was no longer backed by anything physical, just trust. So Nixon struck a deal with Saudi Arabia. America provides military backing and political protection for Saudi royals. In return, Saudi Arabia and eventually all of OPEC agrees to sell oil exclusively in dollars. Now think about what that actually means. Every country on earth that needed oil had to hold dollars first. America could fund wars, print money, run deficits, because the world was always buying its currency just to keep its lights on. You see, that deal held for 50 years, not because every country loved it, because nobody had the leverage to break it. Until now. Maybe. Iran controls the northern coastline of the Strait of Hormuz. For decades, they have threatened to close it if pushed too hard. Most analysts assumed it was a bluff. Then the US and Israel launched strikes in Iranian territory in early 2026. And then Iran responded, not by closing the strait completely, but by doing something far more calculated. Iran kept it open. They kept it open, but only for tankers paying in Chinese yuan. You see, according to CNBC, Iran has already shipped 11 to 12 million barrels of oil to China since the war began, straight through a strait they claimed was closed. Now think of it this way: you're in a conflict with a neighbor. You own the only road that leads to a street. You don't block that road completely. That's too obvious. Instead, you say, anyone can still use that road, but they have to pay my other neighbor's currency, not yours. That's not a blockade. That's a currency code disguised as transit policy. Now, there is an African proverb I always like to use in various geopolitical situations because it is very easy to understand. When two elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. But sometimes one elephant thinks it's fighting a rabbit, and by the time it realizes the rabbit is a lion, it's already deep in the grass. Now, Trump and Israel launched sustained strikes against Iran in early 2026, targeting IRGC facilities and military infrastructure. The logic: shock, fast degradation, regime pressure. Sounds familiar? Same playbook 3 times. But here's what is genuinely different about Iran. Iran has 90 million people, more than 3 times pre-invasion Iraq. Its terrain is mountainous and brutal for any invading force. Its military has been under sanctions for 40 years and has spent every one of those years figuring out it can fight a superpower without matching it weapon for weapon. You don't do that for 4 decades and stay unprepared. Now, what are Trump's options? Let's be honest about each one. Option 1, more strikes. Keeps US casualties low for now, but every strike risks another headline like what happened at the girls' school in Minap. Option 2, a naval showdown in Hormuz. Force tankers through. The problem? Iran has mines, drone boats and anti-ship missiles. One incident and this becomes a completely different war. And China, quietly cutting yuan deals for Iranian oil, finds itself in the crossfire. Option 3, a quiet off-ramp. Declare limited objectives met, pivot to sanctions. Iran's government survives and claims victory. The yuan-Hormuz arrangement stays in place. Option 4, and this is the one no one wants to talk about. Boots on the ground. Military analysts describe 3 invasion corridors into Iran. A western axis through Iraq towards Tehran, a southern amphibious assault around the Persian Gulf coast, and a northern approach working with ethnic minorities inside Iran. All 3 are strategically punishing. Mountainous terrains prepare defenders. An army that has studied this exact scenario for 40 years. The bottom line, a ground invasion would likely require hundreds of thousands of troops and would almost certainly produce a national insurgency, which, if you are being honest, sounds exactly like what experts said could never happen in Afghanistan. Brown University's cost of war projects puts the total bill of post-9/11 wars, Iraq, Afghanistan, at over $8 trillion. $8 trillion, 929,000 lives lost. The Taliban are back in Kabul. Libya is a failed state with weapons flooding the Sahel. And Iran is bigger, more populated, more prepared than all 3 combined. It's time for another quiz. Which option do you think Trump will most likely take? A. Keeps escalating airstrikes, no ground troops, just more bombs. B. Forces a naval standoff at Hormuz. C. Takes a quiet off-ramp, declares victory and pivots to sanctions. D. Goes all in, troops on the ground, within 6 months. There is a player in the story that barely gets mentioned in Western headlines. But if you follow the money, the oil, they are everywhere. China. While the war burns, Reuters reports that China is in active talks with Iran to secure safe passage for its oil and gas flows through Hormuz in yuan. Now, think about what China has just pulled off here without firing a single shot. Iran restricts Hormuz to dollar-dominated oil. China gets a special pass. The yuan becomes the currency of record at one of the most strategic choke points on the planet. Beijing positions itself as the only power that can unlock global energy flows, extracting political and economic concessions from anyone who needs the oil to move. The South China Morning Post noted that some analysts in China are urging caution. But, you see, a total shutdown of Hormuz hurts China too. But the yuan-for-Hormuz signal has opened a conversation that simply was not possible before this war. What if the petrodollar isn't actually mandatory? You can bomb a missile site. You cannot bomb a currency arrangement. Now, here is the thing about being Africa in 2026. Wars happen far away. Decisions get taken in rooms we weren't invited to. And somehow, the meeting bill arrives at our door before the meeting notes do. Let's follow the chain. Iran restricts Hormuz. Oil prices spike. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen told the European Parliament that in the first 10 days of the conflict, EU prices rose roughly 50%. Oil prices 27%, costing European taxpayers around 3 billion euros in extra import costs in just 10 days. $3 billion in just 10 days in Europe, a wealthy continent with diversified energy sources and strong fiscal buffers. Now ask yourself, what do a 27% oil spike do to Kenya, Ghana, or Senegal? These are fuel importing economies. You see, when oil rises, fertilizer rises because fertilizer is made from petroleum products. When fertilizer rises, food production cost rises. And in countries where families already spend 50 to 60% of their income on food, that's not an economic inconvenience. That's hunger. You see, there is a longer play here too. If the yuan-for-Hormuz arrangement hardens into a permanent structure, it reshapes the currency infrastructure of global energy. African countries that price oil exports in dollars, borrow in dollars, and pay import bills in dollars, they find themselves in a world where that dollar dependence carries new vulnerabilities they had no part in creating. But here is the other side to this. Nigeria, Angola, Algeria, Mozambique's emerging gas sector. A sustained period of high prices does increase revenue short term. Those are real cuts. The question serious African strategists should be asking right now is not whether it affects us. Of course it does. African countries developing new energy assets have a window right now to decide how those assets get priced and in what currency they get paid. Now, let's bring this together. Iran made a move that nobody fully priced in. By tying Hormuz to yuan, they gave China a structural win, handed the petrodollar its biggest stress since 1973, and put Trump in a position where every option cost him, politically, militarily, or both. And it landed on African wallets before most African governments even formed a response. What this moment is really revealing is simpler than all the geopolitics. The rules that seemed permanent are being renegotiated, not at a summit, in real time through conflict and strategic desperation. Power is fragmenting, and in that fragmentation, there are still gaps. Gaps where countries that have always been told to follow can actually start to lead, if they are paying attention and willing to move. You see, every player in this story is making a short-term versus long-term calculation, and some of them are making it badly. Now, the lesson for Africa is this. We cannot afford to be surprised by these events because we are never in the room where they are being decided. That means we have to get better in reading the signals early enough, building energy dependence, diversifying trade currencies, and negotiating from our own position of strength, not reacting to someone else's position of weakness. Senegal and Mozambique are sitting on significant gas reserves. Nigeria anchors the African oil economy. Algeria has real leverage in European energy supply. All these are not small cards. The question is, who is holding them? You see, that's not a rhetorical question. That's homework. Here's a challenge for this week. Find out how your country currently prices its energy. What currency, what benchmark, what leverage it has or doesn't have. Because the conversation that has just started in the Strait of Hormuz is heading towards every African economy. The only question is whether you'll be ready when it comes. You see, if this video opened your eyes, share it with someone who needs to see it. Not for the algorithm, because this conversation is too important to stay in one feed. My name is Asonga Luis. You're watching Africa Today, and this is a Strategic Lens. See you in my next video. Bye.